And you're now live.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's 3:40 p.m. and I am going to begin the meeting with land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So at this point, we're going to do the election of chair. So I, at this point, would like to call for any nominations for the position of chair of the District Boundary Resident Review Panel.
I did put my name forward to be chair. So.
Perfect. If I could get a seconder for that.
I'll second that.
Sorry, Jill, I just want to note that there are a couple people with hands raised as well. Pierre, I think you had your hand raised.
Yes, I did. Thank you. I was going to, but I didn't talk to the person. I probably should have first. But I was going to nominate Diane.
Would you like to accept that, Diane?
Sure. I might be more appropriate as vice chair just because I'm fairly new to the area. But yes, I would accept that.
Okay, and if I could just go back and get a seconder for, I'm not sure if we get a seconder for the nomination of Russell Walker.
All right.
Did somebody want to second that?
Sorry, Jill, I'm just going to jump in here again. But again, this is our first virtual meeting, so it is difficult on the back end to see the hand raises when we're trying to do the clerical management. So I would ask, and I normally won't do this in this instance, if you could unmute yourself and verbally say it, it's a lot easier for the clerk in that instance. And my apologies for jumping in.
No problem. Pamela Brennan here. I'll second for Russell Walker.
Thank you so much. And if I could get a seconder at this point as well for Diane would be great.
Not sure what your rules of order are, but I would second that as well.
Thank you so much. So I would call if there's any further nominations. I'm going to call 2 more times for any further nominations. Third and final time, any further nominations? So at this point, what we will do, because there's 2 nominations on the floor, we will move to a Survey Monkey, and you will be provided with a link to do your vote, and then we will be provided the results and we can go forward at that point.
Where's it?
So Ian.
Hey.
I Sorry, if I could just call on your expertise on this. So we just put the link up. Is that how?
So I think what's happened here is we have two names that have been nominated for chair of this committee. So what is going to happen is Jill can send out a Survey Monkey, which will then have a vote for the chair. So everybody in the committee will get a link to this Survey Monkey that they can fill in and vote one way or the other. And that would then determine chair. And then we will do as well this for the vice chair as well. So we do have a chair and a vice chair for the committee. So Jill can put that link in the chat function of Zoom. With both names standing, that's the easiest way we can do it for voting on the chairs.
If I could clarify, Diane, did I understand that you did not want to be put forward for chair, but for vice chair? Is that correct?
I would prefer to be vice chair, I said, but I accepted the nomination as well. So
For
it
chair.
was just, yes.
Does that change anything, Ian, with how we want to move forward with this?
As both names have been moved and seconded, if one of the candidates decided that they did not want to have their name sit, they could pull it back from election of chair, and that would not preclude them from serving as vice chair or being nominated for vice chair.
But I did accept it.
Yes, you did. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. So that's how we're moving forward with the vote, the 100%. Yeah, I was just responding to the question. So yeah, unless somebody were to remove their name, that's what we're moving forward to now. So Jill will put that in the chat. She will have access to the results, but we won't, we'll publish the result in total, and the vote total, we will not be, it'll be a secret ballot this way. So it will be a secret ballot. So Jill, you can just put that forward in the Survey Monkey and put it in the chat. We'll be fine.
Whereabouts is the ballot?
It should be coming to you electronically here momentarily. It's probably just working through the system. If it has too much of a delay, we have another system that we can utilize if needed. We'll see if the Survey Monkey tool works, and if it doesn't, then we have another way we can do this as well.
Is having trouble loading in. It may have.
That is quite all right. So we will do a different process for this instance. I will be sending what I will be doing is I will be sending out an email to every single person on the commission, on the resident review panel. I will be asking for you to reply to the email with me with the name of the person that you are voting for chair. I will then take those, and I will, once I get the email responses, we'll come up and we'll say who is wanted. It'll again be a secret ballot. If you give me one moment, I will send an email here to everyone momentarily. An email has been sent to all members of the resident review panel. If you could reply to it with your vote, I will keep those votes, but it will be a secret ballot, and I will let you know when I receive all the responses. Thank you all, and I apologize for the delay. I can confirm that the chair for the District Boundary Resident Review Panel will be Diane Childs. So Diane, we will pass this over to you now, and you will be chairing the meeting. The next step will be voting for vice chair. If you have any questions, please let us know, and we can help you through this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I expect to have lots of assistance with this new role. Okay, is there anyone who would like to be nominated for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Russell.
Okay, is there a seconder?
I will second that.
Second to John. All right, is there any other nominations as a position of vice chair? I'm asking one more time. Is there any other nominations for the position of vice chair? Seeing none, is Russell Walker's name is put forward. Liam, so does that just happen? We don't have to vote. Saving you an email. I now conclude that Russell is now the vice chair of the committee. Awesome. Okay, moving on, we have no minutes to approve, so we're good because we just had training at the last meeting. Okay, number 3, approval of the order of business. Is there any change in order needed? All the presentations are lined up, I assume, ready to go in the order as presented in the agenda. We're all good to go. Thank you, Liam. Call a motion. Nope, nothing has to be amended. We're good. I've got 3 devices working here. Okay, then the agenda be approved as presented. Everybody good with that? Hands are waving. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so is there any conflicts of interest? I would assume not coming out of what we're talking about in the next presentation. So it's just presentations at the moment. I think we're all good. Great. Okay, so we can move right along to the staff reports. There's no other information to be brought forward at this time. Just getting in the fun of this. So first presentation is from HRM GIS Services. And I invite Ken Lenahan to present, correct? So turning it over to you, Ken. Look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay, thank you. Everybody can hear me. Thanks, Diane. So yes, my name's Ken Lenahan. I'm newly acclaimed for about a month, the GIS manager. However, I work for the city of Halifax and the Halifax municipality now for 35 years. So I was actually the GIS technician for the last full district review back in 2012, and then the part review in, I want to say 2016. So I've had some background in there that I'm just been full involvement when we went from the larger council of 23 down to 16. So I have that background in there. So now taking on the GIS manager will the support we'll provide on this call as well as Lisa O'Toole, who is a data analyst and our Stats Canada expert, as I like to say, dealing with the data, and Alex Gallagher, who is a GIS specialist and does this will be his first kind of go around with the district review. So what GIS, Geographical Information Systems, in case we're full of acronyms. So if what we can provide, I guess, and then I can give you a little bit about my the background as well, because I'm probably one of the few, along with Sarah Knight in legal, that was involved back in the last full review. So I have some of that history there with some things to do. I was the technician that went in front of the UARB and used our GIS system. It was the first time that we actually took the system right to the UARB and made modifications on the fly, showed them the analysis of moving by moving various district boundaries on the fly, what that would look like to both for the most part, the voter population, which is what the UARB is mostly concerned with, but it also provided the population and dwelling counts as well, which is also part of what goes into the final aspect of submission. So basically what we can do in GIS is obviously GIS is mapping, hard copy mapping. Back in 2012, we actually used PDFs when we went out into the public, which now PDFs, though still used, is pretty archaic. We have a lot of applications that we can bring that people can obviously see on their own phones, laptops, any type of device they have. So we've advanced since even 2012, where this archaic little PDF where you're trying to zoom in and things start to, the display is not as, it gets pixelated and not as easy to view. So also what our GIS department did was the data creation. Along with the clerk at that time, Kathy Millette, we drew and moved the boundaries and worked with both the citizens, councillors as well at that time. That's how that committee was sort of formed back then. We made all those edits to that part of it and allowed us to get an idea of what, if we moved a line from here to another place, what that would look like and do to the numbers. So that, and we did that very quickly, which I think is tremendous and will help this panel, as they go out and listen to the public and get any type of information. We can provide the hard copy maps, and however you're going to look to get submissions or suggestions, we certainly can be part of that. We use our what we call a population tool as well as a voter tool. Now that's what that means is it's just a model in the background that we put the data, which the geographical boundaries in, and it will populate the information that you'll be looking to kind of have, again, very quickly. So our group will do that. and support you. We work closely. I know the development and planning will have some suggestions on what to look for as far as any new developments and things like that. And we certainly put that into our GIS as well, and helps with that type of population and dwelling counts, as well as obviously the voter counts to support what you are trying to do. So I think, you know, again, technology and we have advanced. It's kind of on the fly type numbers that we can give. But again, as you come back, and if you want to look at what does it look like to move here, or to what is even a certain area, like if a subdivision, for example, we could draw a box or a polygon, an area around that particular subdivision, and tell you that that is 500 voters. So even before moving a current boundary, we can just tell you what that will look like in terms of what that type of submission might look. So that's sort of what we can do. Our staff has really been at your beck and call. We understand that this is going to be a process that we're going to be heavily supporting you folks as you go out and get your information and your intel. Having been involved before, and I won't get too much into that type of stuff, but certainly the GIS will be supportive of what you're trying to do and help you. So again, I would tell you to kind of look outside just the hard copy maps, which certainly are going to be vital, but at the same time, something that you know, we with our technology can help support. So yeah, and I'll kind of put the floor to you if there's any questions. I know Pierre was with Elections Nova Scotia. He's pretty familiar with GIS and some of the things that we can do with that. So, but I kind of leave it as well to if you have any questions. You know, we have various data sets, buildings, civic numbers, obviously the districts. We have community boundaries. A lot of our districts in the rural areas currently follow community boundaries. So we work closely with civic addressing, who is part of doing that. You know, going out to the communities if there's any boundary changes in communities. You know, we have our street center lines, all that parcel boundaries. So we have a lot of supporting data that's in the background that can help as well. So I'll turn it over if there's any questions you folks have.
I think Pierre actually has a question.
Okay.
I think I saw your hand up, Pierre.
Yeah.
Hi, Pierre.
Hey, Ken. Yeah, I mean, first off, HRM, in my opinion, has one of the best GIS groups and has promoted and leveraged GIS extremely well in the last decade. So kudos to everybody involved there. So I want an online app. Can I have an online app? With all the data you just talked about.
So some of that we already have,
I figured you
as a
did,
matter
yeah.
of fact, yeah. So that's, so we have a whole bunch of different apps that are out there, but certainly, and I don't know if Alex wants to, Alex is certainly familiar. He helps create a lot of the apps that are there, but Alex, if you are able to speak, I'm not sure how the Zoom kind of sets up. If there's an existing app that pretty much summarized everything I just said.
Yep.
Yep.
Can you hear me, Ken?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, for apps, we have apps out there that can accommodate the ability to view prospective boundaries and current boundaries. Yeah, we have an app that can accommodate like making those suggestions, but in terms of actually doing the processing for like recalculating populations from modifying boundaries, that isn't currently in an app. It's on the desktop software. So supporting that into like an online application it's not ready now, and there would be some brainstorming and some chats with different parties to bring that up to speed. But short answer is we can do some of it, but when it comes to recalculating populations with boundary changes, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect that is a big processing side of things, and there's always manual intervention around that, regardless of how much scripting and modeling you do, and that's fine. It's more around the information distribution, and so you would have that. My other question, and I think you might hit on it, Ken.
Yep.
So around the work that was done in the past, and Elections Nova Scotia had done similar stuff, and we had a desktop application, and we made use of versioning, which allowed us to, work with the Boundaries Commission at the time,
Right.
In-person meetings with the GIS technician there, actually making the changes on the fly with the panel there, and able to save that, and then a week later say, hey, remember the one we did last Thursday? Can we bring that back?
Right.
So I'm just hoping that is in place for the back end.
Yeah, so I didn't actually allude to the part. We did send out not just GIS technicians the last time. I did go to some of the sessions. However, we also engaged the planning technicians because, of course, they were even more, they had a GIS background. I know Cameron and Emily's group there now, like they've got a lot of people too. So they also had that planning background where myself or some other technician didn't have that. So we engaged those folks in other sessions to go out with the group. So, but yes, to your question around versioning, that we can certainly make that readily available. Because we did a lot, if Councillor Walker there would remember, we had a lot of different scenarios when we went from 23 down to where we ended up. There was multiple scenarios and ideas and things thrown at that time.
Are there any other questions for Ken or Alex or Lisa at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ken. Oh, wait, Russell has a question.
The only question is how up to date is your info?
Yep, that's a great question, actually. So we have the 2021 census data that we supplied, and actually with the populations. So our data in terms of census data is the more recent one. Our buildings are, they're always a work in progress, but our civic addresses and streets are like right up to date. That is, we have a technician that is solely responsible for those items. Our parcel fabric we get from the province in a lift. I mean, it's as good as what's out there, and that we get I think it's every month. It might sometimes with some things it's delayed, but our information, our community boundaries, well, they don't change much, but again, we have one technician solely responsible for that, and it's right up to the minute, so to speak, on those.
So Bedford South and Bedford West is up to date?
Yes. Now, what you may not have is you would have all the civics with like the building footprints, but again, for what you're doing, the building footprints aren't as interesting other than to see. But yes, all the streets and civics and all that are there. Yes, and then the census data.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
That's an excellent question, Russell.
Yes.
Any other questions for Ken? Seeing none,
Yeah,
thank you. Oh, sorry, back to Pierre.
Yeah, along with Russell's, and I think it was mentioned before, but just confirmation.
Yep.
Around development permit information, you've got a good tie-in with planning, and so we'll have that information available as well.
Yeah, and I know that they've already showed us. We already have created a little map that shows some of the big developments that have been kind of identified. On the positive side, there's no current district boundaries going smack in the middle of them either. Like they're all kind of encompassed in a current district. That doesn't mean that tweaks will not be happening to district boundaries. I'm just saying that was one of the things we looked at. We have already, as a GIS department, looked at areas of where I talk about community boundaries and how we try to align back then as much of the districts around this. And I'll give one example, the Bedford. So District 16, but Bedford community boundary has extended in around Brookline, if anybody's familiar exactly where that is. But right now, that would be in the community of Bedford, but not in the District 16, which basically encompasses all of the Bedford, like prior to that, right? So those, we've identified those areas where we've already done that, just as a just kind of show, hey, this doesn't mean you have to follow community boundaries. But this is some areas where we noted that we're not currently adjoining to those boundaries. So, if that's something that the committee is looking for in terms of, hey, it makes sense to go try to do as many of the communities as possible, we've already identified those areas that at least you can look at and see.
That's very helpful. Thanks. Any other questions for Ken? All right. Thank you very much, Ken, for coming and bringing along.
No problem. Yep. Thank
Lisa
you.
and Alex, it's great. I'm sure we'll be talking very soon.
Very soon. Thank you.
Very soon. Thank you. Okay, the next presentation on the agenda is from Legal and Legislative Services. It's Sarah Knight. Good afternoon, Sarah.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Knight, and I'm a solicitor with HRM Legal Services. And as Ken alluded to, Ken and I have done this before. I was involved in the district boundary review in 2006 and 2010. And then there was one other district boundary review in 2014. I have a presentation. Do you have that, Liam? Can you put that up? Great, thank you very much. So I'm here today to give you a bit of the legal and legislative framework for district boundary review process. Next slide, please. So just to start at the beginning with the legislation, HRM is governed by the HRM Charter, but Section 364 of the HRM Charter, which deals with district boundaries, refers us to the Municipal Government Act, Part 16, which applies to all municipalities in the province of Nova Scotia. And the process that we are currently engaged in results from Section 369, which says in the year 1999 and in the years 2006 and every 8th year thereafter, the council shall conduct a study of the number and boundaries of polling districts in the municipality, their fairness and reasonableness, and the number of councillors. After the study is completed and before the end of the year in which the study was conducted, the council shall apply to the board to confirm or to alter the number and boundaries of polling districts and the number of councillors. So the application that council is working towards through this process must be filed with the Utility and Review Board by December 31st of this year, 2022. And a report from this committee will be with Executive Standing Committee no later than November 22nd, 2022. So this is a process that has fairly compressed timelines that are mandated by legislation and must be met. The boundary review that we are currently undertaking will be implemented for the October 2024 municipal election, and these boundaries will remain in place for 2024 and 2028. The last major district boundary review was undertaken in 2010-11 prior to the 2012 municipal election, and as Ken alluded to earlier, that is the district boundary review in which Halifax Regional Council changed from 23 councillors to 16 councillors. In 2014-15, there was a limited district boundary review that was done that only looked at the boundaries of the districts and not the number of councillors, and there were only 3 boundary changes proposed at that time. Next slide, please. Under the legislation, in determining the number and boundaries of polling districts, the board shall consider the number of electors, relative parity of voting power, population density, community of interest, and geographic size. I've included this slide here because it's the legislation, but I'm going to actually talk about these individual items in more detail later on in the presentation. Next slide. The way this process unfolds, and this is at the guidance of the Utility and Review Board, is that it's divided into 2 phases. In phase 1, council considers the desired number of councillors, and in phase 2, they consider the distribution of polling districts. Phase 1 was Executive Standing Committee, was the committee that was assigned to consider the desired number of councillors and to make a recommendation to Regional Council. And that recommendation went to Executive Standing Committee on Monday, and then we'll go forward from there to Regional Council. Phase 2 is where this committee comes in, and your role is to provide a recommendation to Regional Council through Executive Standing Committee with respect to the boundaries themselves. Next slide. So Council has chosen to implement phase 2 through a citizen-led committee. This is not required by the legislation, but it is one of the options that has been considered in previous decisions from the Utility and Review Board. The administrative order gives the committee its mandate and sets out its role in the process. The key provisions as to the role of the committee are sections 5 and 6 of the administrative order. Section 5 says that the committee will advise council through Executive Standing Committee on proposed boundaries for municipal electoral districts. And as part of that, the committee will lead public engagement, analyze responses and themes from the public engagement, and adjust current district boundaries to develop proposed boundaries. And as I mentioned in the first slide, eventually this will end in an application to the Utility and Review Board. And the Utility and Review Board will hold a hearing at which the application will be considered. The municipality will lead evidence to support its application. And the expectation is that this committee will participate in the UARB process as required. Next slide. This is the last slide in the presentation, and it's just to go into a little bit more detail about what these individual things mean. So these are the criteria that the board is going to consider, and therefore the criteria that this committee should be considering when determining polling district boundaries and drawing the lines. The first criteria is the number of electors, which is how many electors does each councillor represent. And it is electors, not residents. So that's something that comes up from time to time because there is a difference in how many residents live in a district versus how many electors. But the number that the committee will be dealing with primarily will be the number of electors. The next criteria is relative parity of voting power. And the concept of parity of voting power is that all districts should have roughly the same number of electors so that each vote carries the same weight. And the UARB in previous decisions has adopted a case from the Supreme Court of Canada regarding polling district distribution. And that case says that while voter parity is of prime importance, other factors should also be taken into consideration. And they lead to the other factors that are listed here. The target variance from the UARB for relative parity is plus or minus 10% for all the districts, provided that community of interest issues are generally satisfied. And I'll talk about community of interest more later. In exceptional cases, variances are permitted up to plus or minus 25%, but the more that the variance exceeds 10%, the more detailed the justification is required in order to support that application. The next criteria is population density. So the number of people per square kilometer living in a district, and obviously that varies depending on rural versus urban areas. Community of interest, which I think will be touched on by the next presentation, is communities that have common interests between them. And the Utility and Review Board has set out a list of the types of things that would be considered as part of community of interest. So they include things like recreational issues, tax rates, services like water and sewer, fire protection service areas, traffic infrastructure and patterns, planning boundaries, language, ethnic origin, school districts, shopping patterns and business centers, and existing communities themselves. And you will often find that this is an area with a lot of discussion around what are communities of interest, and there can be differing communities of interest within a larger community, and trying to find the best connections between communities within a district. And then the last factor is geographic size, which is fairly obvious, which is how big is the district, which is a consideration for HRM in particular because of the large geographic size of HRM. So those are the factors that, as you draw lines on a map, you will be considering and trying to balance and take into account. That's the end of my presentation. If anybody has any questions.
I think Russell has a question for you. Oh, Russell, I think you have to unmute.
There we go. Is there any way that we can look at, instead of the old tradition of electors, population?
No, the legislation is quite clear that it's the number of electors.
Because the difference is quite big in some districts.
Yes, and it's one of the considerations that council has in terms of broader questions about potential future electoral reform that could happen. But as the legislation is currently drafted, it is only in relation to the number of electors.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Sarah? Seeing none. Thanks for coming, Sarah. I'm sure we'll have questions as we go and we'll reach out to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have a presentation from the Planning and Development. It's Kate Green to give us some information. Kate, you ready to go? I'm having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if anyone else is. Can anyone else hear Kate? Maybe it's just me. No, I think everyone's having a hard time.
Yep.
There she is.
Kate, did that testing the microphone work again this time? I think that's working, Kate.
Is it working now?
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yes.
I hope it stays working. Thank you. All right, so Liam, I think you're going to share the screen if that's okay. That would be a good help for me. And if please speak if it cuts out again for my voice, just because I'll be looking at my notes here and I'm only working on one monitor right now. So Liam, go ahead. It's in notes view, not presentation view.
This is a fun part of Zoom meetings is sometimes it's
Oh, I
difficult.
can't
to get
hear
the
you now, Ian.
Oh, that's fine. Wait, hear me.
Ian, can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Will he start the presentation? Yeah, okay.
So sometimes Zoom is difficult to get the presentations on full screen. Sorry, it's a configuration component. Katie,
Give me 1 second there, Kate, and I'll have it to Katie. Katie will be able to run it. You give me 1 second.
hey Kate, if you want to restart your computer, that would be fine. What I would like to propose here is we've been going at this for an hour. Why don't we, and Chair, if this is a suggestion or potential option, we could take a quick 5-minute break and then we can just come back in here. Hopefully we'll have the presentation queued up and Kate can do a restart at that point in time.
That sounds like a great idea. Okay, it's 4:30, which is, no, it's not. Oh, I guess it is 4:30 Halifax time. I'm using a Halifax computer. So we will see you back at 5:25. All right.
Perfect. Thanks. We won't be putting a holding screen up for anything, but we'll just be getting the presentation queued up and we'll be ready to go in 5 minutes.
Sounds good.
Kate, can you hear anything?
I can hear you, Greg. I'm not sure what's going on.
I think it's her Bluetooth earphones she's using. Something going on there because she first came on, it sounded like she was way in a distance, and as soon as she picked those up, she might have those muted somehow. I wonder if she can just go on her speaker of her computer without those things.
Yeah, I'm gonna check your call. Okay, thanks. I think we got the presentation queued up. We'll give it a show. Thanks, Greg.
Hello, everyone. It looks like we have the presentation loaded and we might be ready to go if everyone's back. Are you there, Kate? Let's give people a few more minutes. I think everything's sorted out. Can you hear us okay
Diane.
now, Kate?
Hi, Diane.
Yes.
Putting a plug in for Elections Ontario. Anybody in the household that you're in that's an elector should go out and vote tomorrow.
Yes, I've reminded them. I actually got a voting card and I'm like, I moved a long time ago, so I will pass it along to my family. Okay, I think most of us are back. Liam, are we okay to get started if Kate is ready?
Yes, Madam Chair, we are good to go. Provided Kate's the audio is working all right. Katie has her presentation teed up and we're ready to go whenever you are.
All right, over to you, Kate.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, and I can hear you. That's exciting. Okay, I just have to do one thing. I had to restart my computer, so I just have to open up my notes here, but we can keep going. So my name is Kate Green. I'm the Regional Policy Manager of in Planning and Development, and I'm here today with Emily Potier, who is a research analyst in our group, in our regional planning group as well. So I'll be taking you through the presentation today, and please let me know if at any time it stops working. And I'm so sorry for the inconvenience there as we try to get this sorted out. Okay, so next slide. So HRM, as you can see here, as I'm sure you're familiar, is a very large land area. And my presentation today will just give you a bit of background around how we think about the region as planners and how we are organizing the development pattern and future growth. So it takes almost 2.5 hours to drive from one end of the municipality to the other. And you can see here, we're very focused on intensifying development in the purple and orange areas of the municipality. So that the purple area represents the regional center and the orange area represents what we often refer to as the suburbs. Next slide. So try turning off the video. Okay, I will do that. Thank you. So underneath this, we govern land use rights on over 100,000 pieces of property, and we regulate across 481 land use zones. And for example, there are 13 different ways of measuring 13 different height definitions. There are 6 different ways of measuring height. There are 12 different single family zones that are applied throughout the region. So needless to say, we are very much working on simplifying that framework and making it easier for people, but it's a significant regulatory framework that we manage. Next slide. And if you drill down a layer again, you would know that water is everywhere in HRM, not just the coast, but we're home to over 1,000 lakes, more than 20 rivers, and innumerable streams and 23 major coastal shorelines. Next slide. So when we think about this, despite the very complex system of land rights and natural assets, we know that our region is beautiful and our coast is marked by active fishing villages, next slide, and traditional fishing villages. And it's also contains significant swaths of untouched areas, next slide. Next slide, and these are right on the edge of our suburban areas as well. Next slide. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with the downtown core, where we are developing significantly right now. We were one of the fastest growing downtown in Canada last census, but the heart of our city contains really beautiful spaces like the Citadel, the public gardens, and the commons, and we're really trying to protect and build from that. Next slide. But the layers underneath the physical form include a city grappling with the growth rate we had hoped for, but maybe didn't expect. So between our census periods, our 2006 and 2021, our population has grown significantly. Next slide. And we pride ourselves as being the second most gender diverse city in the country, just behind Victoria, with about 4,800 people who identify as transgender or non-binary, as recorded in the last sentence. Next slide. And we continue to make reparations for the decisions of the past, such as the complete destruction of the African Nova Scotian community of Africville. And while I'm here to talk more about policy, I'm still approaching this discussion as really someone who's thinking about the different communities and all the pieces of the municipality and how they are knit together. Next slide. So as the regional policy manager, one of the main projects I'm responsible for is the regional plan. And this is a land use document. It sits above all those bylaws, all those zones that I was showing you earlier, and it directs them. Those zones, some of them are left over from before amalgamation, which occurred in 1996. So we are still working with some outdated zones and bylaws, but we do have a plan to upgrade them. But the regional plan was created in 2006, and it identified really strong growth management or smart growth principles. And it was really focused around existing service areas, putting population in places with piped water and sewer. And it was the first comprehensive guide for growth in the municipality. Next slide. How is my sound, Madam Chair? Is it okay?
Yeah, it's great. I can hear you
Okay,
just
great.
fine.
Thank you. Good. All right, so here you can see our regional plan and the timeline that we are on. The regional plan was meant to govern growth between 2006 and 2031. The first one came in 2006. We did another review in 2014. You might know that as RP+5. We did another review, which we're in right now in 2022. We're hoping to finish it. And 2031 is the end of the plan horizon. But really, we are finding we're pushing up against the end of that horizon already because of how our growth rate has changed in recent years. Next slide. The other thing I'll just mention is that a lot of work happens between those plan review years. So for example, the 2014 plan set up that we should do things like the Halifax Green Network Plan, the Climate Change Action Plan, and a series of studies that eventually resulted in what we call our Integrated Mobility Plan. So these are all issue-specific studies that are done at the regional level that we are now bringing back into the regional plan to realize them and help direct growth in a way that creates better communities, essentially. So the regional scale questions that Emily and I have been working on together is really, along with a group of other people, is how are we growing? So what is the projected demand for housing and employment, and what will that be over the horizon of the plan and into the future? And then really, where should we grow? So as I was saying, where are the best places to locate residential and employment growth? The considerations include where land use is today, where development pattern, where people live today, the location of future services and infrastructure and where they exist today, areas we want to preserve, protect, or treat with special attention. So you can think of the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Wilderness area or special heritage sites, places we want to, the Citadel is a great example, places that underpin what makes us special as a community. And then finally, our aspirations for a sustainable future are also impacting our land use patterns. So if you think about Halifax, our climate change action plan, that has decarbonization targets. And we've taken our land use pattern and run that through the climate model
to understand how our settlement pattern relates to those decarbonization targets. Similarly, we have what we call Modeshare targets, so targets for how people walk, roll, cycle, and move about the municipality. We'd like to decrease dependency on cars and increase people's walking, cycling, and transit use across the municipality. So we measure and study how our settlement pattern interacts with those targets, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Next slide. So one of the big things guiding how development and how the region grows and ultimately where people live is the growth targets. So we are in 2006 established a growth rate of 1%. We had 25% of growth targeted in the center, 50% in suburban communities, and 25% in rural. So the percentages there basically are, we're trying to say we'd like to direct new households in these areas, new household formation in these areas. Next slide. And then in 2014, there was a scenario that we studied a whole bunch of scenarios. You might be familiar with what we call the Stantec scenario study, or quantifying the benefits. I can't remember the full title. Anyway, I have it in my, somewhere back there in my brain. But a study done by Stantec, and we evaluated different development patterns. Before we finished this plan, we were looking at our growth targets, the 25, 50, and 25, and realizing we weren't on track. So the Stantec scenarios study looked at how we were growing and said, really, the more you concentrate growth in the core, the better it's going to be for citizens' quality of life. And, you know, the tagline that went along with that study was, you're going to save $670 million in taxpayers' money if you concentrate the development pattern towards the core, towards existing services. So that really shifted how we thought about the development pattern even more. And we really doubled down on investing in the core and development in and around the regional center in our suburban communities. Next slide. So now we're reevaluating our growth targets and studying how we're performing against them. The big change for us in 2022 is that we're growing at double the rate we planned to grow at. So the growth rate that the regional plan was focused around was around 1% year-over-year household growth, and that's doubled. You know, we're hearing and talking and thinking about housing a lot and housing affordability. So that is certainly at the core of this review and what we're focused on. The integrated mobility plan, which is focused on how we move and concentrating development around transit, also has said that, you know, if you want to improve how people move and have more people taking transit, you really need to intensify in and around the core. So we're studying what it would mean to focus 90% of household growth in and around the suburban areas and regional center, and 10% in the rural areas. We're also paying close attention to what's happened with COVID and different trends that are occurring, different ways that people are choosing to live. So that will be something we'll be paying close attention to over the next bit. Next slide. So this is just a summary slide. You can keep clicking there, Katie, thank you. So, you know, again, to just go back over that, the first regional plan was sort of talking about 25%, 50%, 25% in rural communities. We created the center plan, which was focused on the area in purple in the very center of the municipality. We have basically planned for about 40% growth in that area. And then the integrated mobility plan has come and said, let's focus even more on the core. How we performed against our targets as of 2020, there was 31% growth in the regional center, 54% in suburban communities, and 15% in rural. And again, it's not for these targets, it's not about being exact. They're just really guides to help us in thinking about the settlement pattern. Next slide. So when we think about growth and where it should occur, we think about it in two ways. We think about expanding, so where there are pipe services and where should we put new development in what we call greenfield areas or places that haven't yet been developed or maybe are at the edge and close to existing services, but full piped water and sewer hasn't been extended to them. And when we do that, we go through this master planning process. The province has recently announced that they're going to give us a whole bunch of money to kick off this kind of study that we do on these expansion areas. So they'll be funneling about $2.1 million into the municipality to do some study on some of these growth areas. So what we think about is how do we organize the development pattern within that geographic area to avoid ecological and cultural resources, assess watersheds, and figure out the cost for any upgrades to regional infrastructure. We often share in the cost of infrastructure that will benefit the broader community. Next slide. So this is just a slide we probably don't need to spend a lot of time on, but you may hear us or it being referred to the development in future service communities. They are planned growth, planned neighborhoods, really. Examples you might hear about in the news are Sandy Lake, Highway 102, which is right next to Blue Mountain Birch Cove, Morris Lake, and Akuma are all places that we're looking at right now. We are constantly looking at the service boundary and taking in requests to change the service boundary. So we're in the review right now, looking at a series of adjustments. And then we also look long-term at areas for future growth. We call those urban reserves, and we want to kick off work on those. Those were originally identified in 2006 as places we could grow outside of the life of the plan. So after 2031, but where we've been experiencing more growth, we're looking at bringing those online more quickly. Next slide. So this is just a map to show you where these are, which is helpful when you're in the middle of a review, just to get a sense of how the municipality will change over time. So you can see in the top left that green parcel, fully green is Sandy Lake. And then the one just below that to the left of the screen is what we call Highway 102 next to Blue Mountain Birch Cove. At the very bottom of the screen to the right of the harbor is what we call Morris Lake, and that will connect through to Eastern Passage. And then just above that is what we call Port Wallace. So those are a few of the places we're looking at. The hatched area just above Morris Lake is called Akuma, and that we're bringing that online because of council's focus on on African Nova Scotian communities and supporting their economic prosperity through the Road to Economic Prosperity Action Plan. Next slide. So the other thing we're really thinking about is where can we infill and transform existing communities? So how are we ensuring sustainable redevelopment of land? That means identifying a site suitable for intensification along transit lines in places that are ready for redevelopment that align with delivery of key services, like where our multi-unit facilities are, where our big parks are, where there are commercial and employment areas. And again, in those places, we want to try and streamline our regulatory approvals as much as possible to make it easier for development to happen. Next slide. So the way we're doing this infill work is through a project we call Plan and Bylaw Simplification, and the center plan was the first phase of that. After the center plan, we're intending to do a suburban plan, and then after that, we'll do a rural plan. But the center plan rules exist today. The suburban plan and the rural plan are still a dream in our minds. So the center plan has directed growth into centers, corridors, and higher order residential areas, and also into growth nodes, mainly underutilized sites in the core. So think of Micmac Mall, Shannon Park, Dartmouth Cove, and many of those are being worked on, and development plans are being worked on for those right now. And then the suburban and rural plan, we're just starting our analysis on that. Next slide. So this is a look at the infill areas and where they are. And if you could go to the next slide. This is a close-up of that. So you can see in purple the downtowns, and then represented in the big circle basically the peninsula and inside the cirque on the Dartmouth side on the right. That's where the center plan is. So these regulations exist today. These areas have been identified as places for growth. The areas that run out what we call Portland Street, Burnside, up through Dunbrack and Lacewood, and then along Herring Cove, the tentacles that sort of reach out into the suburbs. Those are ideas that we have. That's where we want to support higher order transit. We know that land use is a really important part of making sure that there are people who are using transit. So we want to intensify in the places where we're going to have really high levels of service, so we can help shift the city towards having public transport as opposed to very significant auto dependent suburbs. So these lines, you can't see the map here, but these lines are the core lines that will develop over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And as we move ahead with the suburban plan, we'll be intensifying in and along those corridors and working with communities to understand their vision for how we should redevelop. Next slide. So some things we're paying attention to is that migration is shifting, and really we have had significant immigration and significant net interprovincial migration over the past bit. So we're really watching those numbers and what's happening with our population. There are, and Emily has a lot of detail on this, but we do have a lot of young people that have moved here from Ontario, younger people, since COVID started. And we are expecting continued high levels of immigration, both folks who are coming here from Ukraine, and then also both federal and provincial governments are supporting in policy and delivering on high immigration. Next slide. So we develop population scenarios, and we've provided Lisa and the group, Liam, here with some population numbers, I think around 2024, if I have the number right. They are taken from our population work that we've done. These are really projections out to 2050 on both what we anticipate in terms of population and households. We added a high scenario. We've come up with a new name for that, which I don't remember off the top of my head. Emily will know it, high immigration or something like that. But because the provincial government is really pushing that they want to increase immigration, we're suggesting that we could reach a population of 1 million in 2050 if that growth occurs. So this is just to help us in assessing whether or not the land use, where there are settlement pattern and the regulations that we've enabled are in a place where they can enable this growth to happen. So we use these projections to help us evaluate really how growth is happening and if it will keep up with different scenarios for growth, even downturn. Okay, next slide. So we do have some district profiles, and I'm just going to try and open them. I lost them when I had to shut down my computer, and I'll share my screen. So if you just bear with me here, I'll open that file up. And hopefully be able to share my screen. Oh, it wants to. Why is it doing that? There we go. Okay, I am hoping you can still hear me and that you can see my screen.
Yep, all good.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So we pulled this together. It's up to date up to 2020, and this represents the current electoral district areas and what we've been seeing in terms of growth and population change. So we can certainly circulate this to you all. The first page is obviously the entire municipality, and then it breaks down by district. So you can see here's Musquodoboit, or Waverly Fall River, Musquodoboit Valley, District 1, and you can get a sense of the rate of change and what growth has been happening there. We are in the process of updating that with new data, so we can send that along once that is done, but we just wanted to make you aware that that resource was available. And that's it for me.
Well, that's going to be really helpful to get that information. And I think it was brought up in the chat how we're hoping to get a copy of your presentation or a link to have it to refer back to it. Thanks very much, Kate. Growth management is so important looking forward. And sometimes it's hard. You don't have a crystal ball. Those people from Ontario, they're the problem. I can say that.
We're happy to have lots of people. We're happy to have lots of people. We just have to keep building lots of housing.
Best move I ever made. Yes. Do we have any questions for Kate? I don't see any, but I'm sure once people look at the materials again, Kate will be reaching out with some additional questions for you. But thank you very much for your presentation, and you'll hear from us soon. Thanks.
Wonderful. Good luck. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so does everyone remember the schedule we were handed of the potential meetings? I think the next one's on the 15th, I believe, in 2 weeks, and it's going to be in person. Is that correct, Liam?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So can we have a motion that we approve the proposed 2022 meeting schedule? Thanks, Russell. Everyone's good with that? Seconder? Probably need a seconder. Yes. Thanks, John. This is very challenging on Zoom. I'm remembering it all now. Appreciate that. Is there any other items people would like to discuss? Yes, Russell.
On the meeting schedule, I won't be here on August the 17th. I'm in PEI that week. And so is there anybody else that can't make a date? I think we should discuss it now. That's all.
Sure. I think, or we could discuss it maybe when we're in person. It might be easier.
Yes.
I think we're good for the 15th. So why don't we try to book at least a couple of meetings ahead to see? It'll be challenging over the summer. I'm sure we all have holidays booked, but I think we're good for if we're good for the 15th, and then maybe at the next meeting, we'll look ahead for the rest of July, for June and July. Does that work for everybody? That would be my suggestion. Pierre gave me a thumbs up. Okay, that's good.
We're still City Hall for that one, 15th?
I believe so, yeah.
Perfect, that's good.
Awesome.
Madam Chair, I'd just suggest that we do a vote on that proposed schedule, and knowing full well that any amendments can be made at any time as well.
That's perfect. Okay, I'm new, rookie. Okay, can we have a vote? Is everyone okay with the proposed schedule for now? Realizing it may change a little. I think that's everyone. Oh, Pamela, there you go. Great. Thanks. That works. Thumbs up, Liam. It's all good. Okay, so I think we have no public today. We have no other additional items. So I think that's it for today until our next meeting at June 15th back at City Hall.
Great. Thank you. Good job,
That
Chair.
ends the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good job, Chair. Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.